Well, the sermon today is about defining moments. In every life, there are moments which define the rest of your life. It might be when you decided to get married or have children, or what school you went to, what your career path was that you chose. And once you choose your path, it's pretty much your path for the rest of your life. Usually you choose what is good. Sometimes people choose what is not so good. There's a story about a preacher who was talking to a man who was in jail. And he said to him, "Well, why didn't you just say, 'Get thee behind me, Satan'?" And he said, "Well, I did. But Satan said, 'Doesn't matter who leaves. We're going in the same direction.'" In our gospel reading today, Jesus was tempted by the devil to have all the kingdoms of the world in exchange for Jesus' worship of him. And in our Old Testament reading for today, Joshua urges the people to resist the temptation to follow idol worship and to turn again towards the Lord. Well, the Israelites are at a defining moment in their lives. What they choose will define them as a nation. For the past several weeks, we've been following the stories of the people who were active in the development of Israel. We've heard the stories of Noah, Abraham, Joseph, and Moses. And since the death of Moses, Joseph is their spiritual leader. Well, as usual, the book of Joshua selection that we have for today did leave out a lot of stuff. And so I'm going to tell you about it, so it's some kind of more of a context for what we've got today. Well, the first half of the book is all about the battles that he fought. I mean, everyone knows about, the Battle of Jericho. Those songs we had as children kind of get, like an earworm, Joshua fit the Battle of Jericho. How many people know that? Yeah, I see nods. Okay. No one's brave enough to join me, but I see the nods. Well, that wasn't the only war that was fought. There were many, many wars. And quite often there was nobody left alive at the end of these wars. Well, we got to figure out, since they say over and over that God was with them, how could God participate in war crimes? Well, I think first of all, it's important to know that there is no historical or archaeological evidence that these actually occurred. In fact, some of the cities that were supposedly destroyed, they have ruins of, but they were not occupied. And there are certainly stories about how the Israelites lived with the Canaanites and the Amorites and actually did business with some of them. So what is this story about? Well, I think we need to look at when it was written. It was written between the 7th and 6th century. And that's important because that's the time of the Babylonian captivity, when the people were beginning to lose faith in their God and in their future. And so this story is written to remind them of the good things that God has done for them. And that would be in terms of the battles that were fought and the victories that were obtained. But despite his successes, actually the campaign was a failure. They did have many tribes that they did not conquer. And, God sort of says, leave that to me. And that didn't happen. So this idea of a holy war is not justified by what is here. Now, the tribes that Joshua was directed to fight were not picked at random. You have to go back a few generations to the sons of Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. From Shem came Abraham, Moses, and Joshua. And from Ham came Canaan, who was cursed in all his generations. So these are the events that brought Joshua to this point of renewing the covenant with the tribes. They have been settled into territories, and allotments, and cities have been established. They are at peace, at least for the moment. Now Joshua is elderly and near death, and he wishes to leave a legacy. The purity of Israel depends on their commitment to serve the Lord. If they do not put away their foreign idols, they will be assimilated into the people that they have fought against. They are at a defining moment. If they don't choose God, then they are no longer Israel. They are no longer the nation of God. When Jesus was offered all the kingdoms of the world, he knew the temptations and he knew the costs of temporal power. Imagine what you could do with all that power. You could use it for good. You could feed people, you could give them housing and medicine if you had all that power. Well, that's the temptation that we face too. Jesus knows his kingdom is not of this world. He came to serve, not to be served. He will not turn stones to bread, but he will become the bread of life. He won't take that shortcut to power, but he will be given dominion over the powers of this world by God in heaven. Jesus will show the way that there is power in weakness. If he walks this path with the devil, he will not walk the path to Golgotha. Jesus is choosing the cross when he chooses to refuse the devil. Well, what do these stories mean? Not just to us, but what did it mean to the first people who heard this, the early Christian community? Well, they were in a state of very early development. They were clusters, basically, of families, and they hadn't yet developed much beyond that. And so these lessons are about patience, endurance, and submission. Their community is small, but it will grow in time. It takes time to make bread. It doesn't just magically appear from stones. And they need to have endurance if they're going to survive under a ruthless oppressor. It was in the old stories, it was the people that they fought against. In our New Testament story, it's about fighting the devil, who, of course, is the representative of Rome. So it knows that you need to be careful who you call your Lord, who you submit to. So the temptations of Jesus, they represent the same ones we face today. There's that saying, what's the word? I was going to say, I can survive anything but temptation, or I can endure anything but temptation. Resist, that's the word I'm looking for. I can resist anything but temptation. Yeah, that's how some of us live. There are times when we want to take the shortcuts to where we want to be. We want the quick fix and instant gratification. We don't want to take a long journey to get to a destination, when the destination is more important than the journey. Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days. He was driven there by the Spirit right after his baptism. So the high points of our lives can sometimes be followed by sudden disastrous lows. If we take the time, we will find that middle ground. Places of wilderness is where great lessons can be learned. Our wilderness can be physical, emotional, or spiritual. It's the places where we struggle. There's time when we might feel that we're on shaky ground and that we don't know who or what we can trust. Coming out of COVID can be like that. We're not quite sure if it's gone away, and we need to be on our guard, because we never know where it's going to happen next. We're in a time of economic and political turmoil. We all know that our gas prices and our Food prices have been going up. We are feeling it in the gas pumps and the grocery stores, the lack of what we see there. And yet we need to think about people in other parts of the world that don't have any access to food or to fuel. I'm thinking particularly on World Food Day of the places where there simply is no food. People are in famine. And the United Church of Canada is part of the Food Grains Project. Am I saying it right? Yeah. Yep, okay. Which grows and sends food to where it's most needed. So every little bit helps. Whatever you can do, whether it's contributing to our local food bank or committing to world hunger, there's something that we can do. We know also that our freedom is actually at stake. You know, we have heard about the rise of populism, but I don't think we really know what it is. And it's basically the rule of the majority, that the majority will make the decisions of leadership and how the country is run. And some people feel that's fair. The majority has been silent for too long. But there's one problem with that. There is little concern for the minorities when you looked at that kind of a setup. What about the people who are struggling for some reason or another that can't quite keep up to the majority? What about the people who are excluded, like foreigners, like other people? What about LGBTQ people? You know, my marriage might not be valid under a populist government because they are moving that way in the U.S. The same laws they used in the abortion fight were also discussed in terms of making illegal gay relationships and also interracial ones. So that's kind of interesting. So when I see that rise of populism that's happening in this country, it makes me very, very nervous. Because our democracy is different. Democracy cares about all people. It rules on behalf of every person and takes care of the rights of all people. Our scriptures today have told us to remain fast to our ideals and resist temptations that would tear us away from God. You know, I kind of know that I was I was tempted to stay in chaplaincy. It paid very well. I had regular hours. I could take weekends off. There were a lot of perks, you know. But I was being called to pastoral ministry, and it was quite a strong call. And so I had to jump into it, and we struggled sometimes through it, my partner and I. Yep. But by the grace of God, we made it. So sometimes those temptations may come in very temporal, earthly ways. There are sometimes other temptations that are more internal. One of them, I think, is the temptation to despair. You know, if you're feeling despairing, well, then you don't have to do anything about anything. You're in despair. It takes work to say, no, I'm going to live in hope. I'm going to live as if things are going to be okay. You know, when I start worrying about the future, and I'm kind of a pessimist, so I look and think, oh, how are we going to manage? What are we going to do? I have to remember that that time hasn't come yet. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I have no idea at all. All I know is that I can follow God every step of the way, and that I will end up where I'm supposed to be. It may not be somewhere that I like, but it will be where I am supposed to be. When we fight our battles with temptation, we have the knowledge that Jesus also overcame his temptations. The good news is that Jesus is with us. Jesus has already won the battle for us. We're just the cleanup crew. We are not alone. We live in God's world. May it be so. Amen.